Morning. It's morning in Melbourne. Got the big coat back out. Not as hot in Melbourne as it was in Brisbane, I can tell you that. But another morning and another interview, and it's amazing how many opportunities I'm getting in Australia to get this information out in the mainstream. But one little thing started to happen. More and more, they're being recorded, not put out live, which is what I prefer. But anyway, don't complain. Use it where you can. People like George Orwell and Aldous Huxley in Brave New World were not coming purely from their imagination. They were coming from an understanding of this projected agenda.
That's fascinating, because just to fill listeners in, that they are the two books that are held up as being so prophetic about the future that we're heading towards. When they were written in the 30s, 40s.
1984 in Brave New World?
Yeah.
Brave New World was published in 1932. 1984 was published in 1948. And here's the point.
And at the time, they were like, they're ridiculous fantasies, but they seem to be coming true.
So here's the question. Why have they been so unbelievably accurate? Because they weren't coming purely from their imagination. They were coming from an understanding of where this was going. They knew each other.
So why didn't
Aldous Huxley taught French to Orwell at the elite Eton College.
I understand that, but why didn't the powerful beings snuff them out then? Why aren't they taking care of business?
Because there's 7 billion people on the planet, and there are a relative handful that are in full knowledge of what's going on. They have to do it from the hidden.
Right.
And what they have done is incessantly centralize power in every area of our lives. For many decades now, it's been given a name: globalization. Look at the world, look at corporations. Look at the trade agreements and the power they're giving to corporations. Look at the centralisation of politics.
Do you think
things
the internet
like the European Union.
one of their tools?
Well, I go into the internet big time in these talks and put it into context. The internet is very much part of it. But again, there's a backstory to talk about before what I would talk about would make any sense. But let's look at the internet.
But can I just ask you, because I know that's a big one.
Yeah.
Can we get around to, like, say, the American election, the current election?
Right.
I believe you have some thoughts about that.
Okay, let's bring it down even further to politics. Okay, let's look at how politics works. America's a free country, right?
Yeah.
Australia's a free country, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see how free we are. Britain's a free country. I heard it. I read it somewhere. This is how politics works. You, in every country, and this is systematic, this is how the structure's been made to happen. In any country, you overwhelmingly have one of two parties to choose from to become the government. Sometimes 3, overwhelmingly 2. So you vote for party A, and they get into government. You don't like what they do. So come an election, you have one choice to get rid of party A, and that's to vote for party B. Party B gets in and they don't change anything, goes on the same. So when you come to the next election, the only way of getting rid of party B is to vote for party A. Do you know something? I spoke in, this is how crazy it is. I spoke in Ukraine in 2011. And in 2004 in Ukraine, there was something called the Orange Revolution, where they threw out a president for corruption. When I went back in 2011, that guy was now the president again. And you know why? Because they put another guy in as a result of the revolution. They didn't like what he did, so the only way of getting rid of him was to vote for the other party, and the other party was still headed by the guy they threw out in the revolution, so he's now elected back in. This is the madness of it. And the point is this: if you look at the American structure, it's classic, but it's the same everywhere. Under Bush, you had a group of people around him which were acknowledged in the mainstream media, called the neocons or neoconservatives. Yeah. These were the people that took over the Pentagon and many other parts of government when Bush came in.
These were the hawks who were very desperate to go to war.
Exactly.
In Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah,
and
they drove it.
Yeah,
You're right. They drove it. Now, in the Democratic Party, you have a similar group, which I call the democons. This is people like the billionaire George Soros, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's former national security advisor, etc. The democons were dictating the Bush administration. the neocons were dominating the Bush administration. The democons have dominated the Obama administration. And Obama could not have claimed more that he was about change and being different. But it's gone on the same. Why? This is the point. You go back one step into the shadows from the neocons and the democons, and they answer to the same force. So whoever's in power, that same force is in power. So when we look at what we have now, we have a choice between two frickin' psychopaths. But I've been investigating Hillary Clinton and the Clintons since the early 1990s. The story is extraordinary, and many people have come out and written books from the inside. Of course, they don't get anywhere with it.
Yeah.
And then you look at Trump. The idea that he's an anti-establishment candidate is ludicrous.
Yeah.
I watched his speech the other day. He's talking about getting rid of ISIS, and we'll do it quickly. Getting rid of this, and we'll do it quickly. Not a single word on how it's supposed to be done.
So are these people, Clinton and Trump, reptilian humanoids, or are they just puppets and answering to the shadowy figures?
Well, this is the
behind?
thing. This is the thing with politics. You get the few who are of this bloodline, and you get the many who are just puppets.
Yeah. Right.
Clinton's bloodline, big time. Trump,
absolute reptiles?
Trump, I have no idea. Oh, absolutely. About Trump, I have no idea.
I get a reptile-y feel about the Clintons, and I'm not being a smart-ass. When you say that, I go, yeah,
well,
I get a vibe.
It is, when you say bloodlines, royalty I understand, but in elected outcomes, it is very odd how the Bushes and the Clintons and the Kennedys and the same...
The dynasties.
It's really just like an elected royal family.
You picked on it. I put this in my books years ago. You look at it. You had Reagan, Father Bush, when Father Bush was president.
Yes.
Then you had 2 terms of that, and then Father Bush had an official 3rd term when he was president. He hands over then to 2 terms of Clinton. He then hands over to 2 terms of Bush. Then we have Obama in here. Now Clinton's going for it.
Yeah.
There's 300 million people in America.
Yeah.
Well, the Kennedys were even worse, surely.
Well, they're all dynasties. You know, the Eastern Establishment families, as they call them in the United States, interbreed absolutely as incessantly as royalty ever has, because they're holding a genetic structure.
So what are we going to do? What's the plan? What do we need to stop?
And what's our
or
future
the
look
threat?
like? Where are we going here?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what the future looks like if we don't get our asses in gear. It would make George Orwell wince.
But what's asses in gear? Do we need to start a war, a revolution?
No, that's the last thing we need to do. We need to stop cooperating with the system.
Right.
We need to do what Gandhi talked about, what Martin Luther King talked about. Stop obeying laws that are simply there to enslave us. Because if we don't, nothing's going to change. How can it? You know, a few people in Parliament say that we've had a discussion, this is what we're going to do. If people say, oh, I don't like it, but we better obey them, well, what's going to happen? We're going to be enslaved completely. Look at where it's going. More and more surveillance, more and more control, more and more deletion of privacy. Now think on this. What is it going to be like for our kids and grandkids? Because this is only where it is now, not where it's meant to stop.
Yeah.
You know, and if I look at that crowd during the Trump speech, holding their silly bloody placards up and cheering, and that is a religious crowd looking at a Messiah. And what am I looking at? I'm looking at a crowd from another party that did the same for Obama, who changed nothing. We've got to stop looking to others, especially politicians, to sort this out. We've got to start sorting it out ourselves. You know, if they have a discussion, I mean, what is it, 226 MPs in Canberra, 24 million people, and they're telling Australians what to do? Are you kidding? And there's people telling them what to do. I was stunned the other day, I'd never seen it before, when I saw the Prime Minister, Turnbull, having to call the Governor-General, Your Excellency, and asked to be signed in as Prime Minister of this country, and then stand at a podium having to introduce to be signed in his members of his government by this representative bloke from a woman 13,000 miles away. Hello, is it only me?
No, well, I think we're unhappy with it, but can't it just be ritual and tradition? You think we're all darker, slaves to it?
Ritual and tradition is there to
I know.
more than symbolise, to be a representation of where the real power is. We just got a new Prime Minister in Britain,
Yeah.
not elected, of course, except by our own party, or even, in fact, not even elected by our own party, the way it turned out, called Theresa May. And there's a picture on the internet you can see where she's introduced to the Queen, and she's curtsying. The Queen isn't. The Prime Minister of Britain, the previous one, Cameron, when he met the Queen, he was bowing like some courtier. He's the elected leader of the country. That ritual, that curtsy, that bow, that symbolises where the real power is, and it's not with the elected people. I mean, how can you say that the Prime Minister of Australia has the power when he has to kowtow and Your Excellency and stand up for Your Excellency? For just a representative of some bloodline in London. It's ludicrous. Hello.
The Prime Minister can also have the Governor General removed. It's just a quintessential confusion of form. You say, enough, we can't tolerate it, but we can't just go out and start kicking down buildings. Do you think we've just got to... I mean, do you want us to go to your lectures?
Who suggested we should?
Well, I keep asking you what you want us to do.
Stop cooperating.
Well,
Stop cooperating with our own enslavement.
Don't go to work, don't pay tax. What do you mean?
Well, one of the things that people can do is stop voting. Because if it's a farce and you're being... You see, voting is only freedom if you're given a choice. And if you're not given a choice, that is not a free act because you're choosing from two masks on the same face.
But won't we end up with the worst possible mask every time if we don't vote? Aren't we just slowing things down a little, at least by voting? If we stop voting...
It's a mess.
Yeah, the worst politicians in Australia will be running
Hold
it.
on a second. Do you think turning this stuff back is going to be easy?
No.
Do you think there's not going to be a transition period when there's upheaval? Of course there is.
Yeah.
But you have your question. Are we going to keep on kowtowing, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, and being forced to vote or be fined? What is that? What is the most basic freedom that anyone can have? The freedom not to partake in the system because they don't believe it is fair, just, and anything to do with democracy. And that is removed for a lot of people because they face a fine if they don't do so. How many people would really vote in this country if there wasn't a fine for it? It's outrageous. And see, things happen and people kind of take them in and get on with their lives. I'm sitting back in England hearing about this no benefits if you don't vaccinate your children. And the first word that comes to me is fascism. If we are not in control of what goes into our own bodies and our own bodies of our own children, or we will get sanctioned with benefits which we need to survive, that is fascism. It's nothing to do with freedom and democracy. And I would say to people, look around you, get the blinkers off, right? Get through the smoke screen and have a look at the scale of control of your lives that the state now has.
Can I ask you a question about what is probably the most popular conspiracy theory, in inverted commas, at the moment in the world? CNN did a poll and found that 84% of Americans, last year this was, don't believe that 9/11 happened the way the government says it happened. They don't go into more detail than that, except to say that they don't believe the official line. Now, I don't think it's too much of a stretch of the imagination to be able to draw a very clear line from the September 11 attacks all the way through the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq to where we are now, where we've got teenagers, Muslim teenagers attacking people in Germany.
I can draw that line in 2 minutes with great detail, but let's start off. Let's take a breath and have one sobering thought about 9/11. Because what we've had since 9/11 is, and particularly since 2003 and the invasion of Iraq, is global journalistic schizophrenia, cognitive dissonance. The people that are now accepted widely to have lied to us about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to justify a war of slaughter of the innocent and all that's come from it are not only the same agencies, they are the same individuals that gave us the official story of 9/11. Let's not forget that. So, what we're asked to believe is they lied about that to justify a war, but they told the entire truth about 9/11, which started the sequence that led to that war. I mean, hello. Now, 9/11. In September 2000, there was a group, we're back to them again, the few months later was going to be head of the Pentagon. Paul Wolfowitz, who was going to be his deputy, Dov Zakheim, who was going to control the whole Pentagon budget a few months later, and Dick Cheney, who was in fact President of the United States during the Boy Bush years. And they produced a document calling for America to fight multiple theater wars to create a series of regime changes. And they named the countries: Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, etc.
Wow.
And they said in this document in September 2000 that this, what they called process of transformation, would necessarily be long and slow, and this was the words they used in the document, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. A few months later, these people came to power with Bush. 9 months after they came to power, and 1 year to the month after this document was published, we had what George Bush called at that time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. As a result, all these things have happened. But there's more. In 2007, General Wesley Clark, a former Supreme Commander of NATO, did an interview on an alternative station in America called Democracy Now! You can see it on the internet, in which he told his story of 9/11. He said a few days after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon, he met Rumsfeld, he met Wolfowitz, and then he met a friend of his, a general of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And this general, he said to him, we're going to invade Iraq. Days after 9/11, we're going to invade Iraq. So Clark said, what do you mean we're going to invade Iraq? Why? Is there a connection to 9/11? And the general said, well, no, but maybe we think, we've got to do something, we've got a big military, we better invade someone in response. So anyway, Clark goes away. A few weeks later, he comes back to Pentagon, and by now, America is in Afghanistan. And he met the general again. And he said, why aren't we invading Iraq? I thought we were going to invade Iraq. And he said, the general said to him, it's worse than that, sir. He said, and he picked up a piece of paper off his desk and said, I've just had this up from upstairs, Rumsfeld's office. He said, we're going to attack 7 countries in 5 years. And what were they? They were Libya, Syria, Iraq. And so when you have the exposure of the Bush and Blair administrations lying through their teeth to justify the invasion of Iraq, the reason was this: Iraq was on the list and they had no excuse. They had to make one up. Now let's go to Libya. That was on the list. That's ticked off, but hold on. By now, it's not Bush and Blair, it's Obama and Cameron. Different people, different parties, same agenda unfolding. And what have they gone on to do? They've gone on to Syria, which is another one on the list. And this is how it works. This is how the hidden hand works. And let's look at Mohammed Attar, right? This extreme Muslim, right, who was the lead hijacker on 9/11. You can see an interview with his white American girlfriend where she describes how he was a cocaine addict, how he was often blind drunk, and his favorite food was pork. And where they got their cocaine from was the Venice airport in Florida, where many of these people, including Attar, were supposed to have learned to fly wide-body jets in one-engine Cessnas, because Venice airport is a notorious conduit for the CIA drug-running operation out of South America.
Well, now we're getting somewhere.
Which Attar was a gopher in. And so this is why his girlfriend said, whenever we ran out of cocaine, he went across the Venice airport and came back with masses of it. The story...
The CIA were giving it to him. That's the...
Yeah, because he was working for them.
David,
And what
I tell you what, I'm so sorry we've run out of time, but
Okay,
so many things you've helped me understand, including why you have a 10-hour
right, exactly.
program. Because honestly, you have.
Yeah, you're right.
You have given us so much
There's such a
context already,
backstory.
and it does make me want to know. Hang on, and it makes me want to have a moment to get it clear in my head before you move on and all that. I understand why people are coming to your events. thank you so
Okay.
much for your
Please,
time.
when the Armageddon is or whatever, remember us. We've
No.
been a sympathetic
Listen.
ear.
The whole point of my life is to alert enough people so it doesn't happen, and I'm confident it won't. But what I do in the talks is I go from A to B to C
Yeah.
to D.
It's linear.
You know,
Makes it easiest for us.
Also,
Yeah, absolutely.
digest.
lots of material online if people want to catch up with you
Endless
online.
amounts.
Yeah, brilliant.
DavidIcke.com.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
you
fellas.
very much.
Thank you, fellas. What are we talking about? Thank
Well,
you.
she's a shapeshifter. She can be a
Oh, yeah.
Much longer than I thought, and it was interesting. You know, it's difficult when you do interviews like with mainstream stations and they go into the deep stuff, but because you face this, there's such a backstory before it makes sense, but you can work with it, and when they get onto the areas that people can relate to, then it can be very, very powerful for people who are listening, like 9/11 and how politics works. So, you know, it's all good because it's getting out there like it's not got out there before in the mainstream. Great stuff.